All right, so get this. We're going deep on AI that can actually solve problems step by step.
Like a human.
Yeah, it's like showing your work on a math test, but it's an AI and it's called Virgo.
Right. And this paper, it really digs into how these slow thinking, multimodal large language models, or MLLMs for short,
All right.
work.
MLLM's got it.
It's really cutting edge stuff, especially when you look at how Virgo can handle these super complex visual problems.
Oh, yeah, like the kind of problems you'd find in like a science or math competition or
That's an
something.
exact.
Okay, so no more AI magic tricks. They're actually showing us the thinking process.
That's the idea.
Super interesting. But before we jump into Virgo and all that, can you maybe break down this whole slow thinking concept a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So it's not really about speed like it sounds. It's more about getting the AI model to actually show how it's reasoning. So breaking a problem down, showing the steps it takes to get to a solution.
Okay, so it's not just magically spitting out an answer.
Right. It's more like, when you solve a puzzle, you don't just like immediately know where every piece goes. You got to try different things, maybe make some notes,
Right.
and then eventually you get there.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do you, like, teach an AI to think that way?
Yeah.
And also, tell me more about this Virgo. What is it exactly?
Well, Virgo is based on something called Qwen2VL,
Okay.
which is a powerful model on its own. It can understand both text and images.
Yeah.
But the researchers behind Virgo, they wanted to see if they could push it even further, make it even better at reasoning through these complex visual problems.
Give it that problem-solving edge.
Exactly.
So how did they do that? How did they train Virgo?
So they used two main methods. First, they kind of exposed it to tons of this text-based data, data that basically shows how other AI models reason through problems. Think of it like giving Virgo access to a bunch of study notes from like straight A students.
Oh, learning from the best.
Yeah.
What about the second method?
Well, the second method involved another really impressive MLLM called QVQ. They used that as a sort of teacher AI. So they basically had QVQ solve a bunch of problems, and then they use those solutions to train Virgo, almost like having a tutor guide it through the steps.
Interesting. So it's like textbook learning and personalized tutoring, but for AI.
Right.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So they trained Virgo to think slow, but how do they actually know if it works?
Good question.
How do you even test something like that?
Well, to really push Virgo's limits, they used 4 different benchmarks: MathVerse, MathVision, Olympiad Bench, and MMMU.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, but each of those, they include all sorts of visual problems, some of them insanely difficult,
Yeah.
to really see how well Virgo could apply its slow thinking skills.
Time for the results.
Yeah.
Did all that training pay off?
Yeah.
Did Virgo pass the test?
The results are pretty impressive, yeah. Virgo performed really well, even rivaling or sometimes beating some of the big commercial models out there, like OpenAI's O1,
Oh, wow.
and even its teacher QVQ, on certain tasks.
So it's like surpassing the master.
In some cases, yeah. It's really promising, especially because this research is still, it's very early stage.
So Virgo can hold its own against the big names. That's pretty exciting. But I'm curious, what specific insights did the researchers actually get from all this testing? Like, did they learn anything surprising about how Virgo learns or solves problems?
Yeah, definitely. One of the most interesting findings was that Virgo showed the biggest improvement on the hardest problems, particularly in Olympiad Bench.
So the tougher the challenge, the more that slow thinking approach helps.
It seems that way. It suggests that, breaking down those really complex problems into smaller, more manageable steps, it's key.
Yeah, makes sense.
Just like it is for us,
Right.
That's
Yeah.
like having that extra gear when you're tackling those real brain busters.
Okay, that makes sense. But are there any downsides to, like, making Virgo think so much? Can AI ever overthink?
That's a really interesting question, and it turns out, yeah, it can. They found that forcing Virgo to think for too long on some of these tasks actually made its performance worse.
Wow, so there is such a thing as too much deliberation, even for AI.
Yeah, it seems like it. It really highlights that challenge of, finding that right balance between being thorough and being efficient.
Right.
Even for AI, overthinking can sometimes be a problem.
Fascinating. Almost makes me wonder if our brains have similar limits, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
But you mentioned earlier that they used those 2 different methods for training Virgo, the text-based data and the teacher AI.
Right.
Did those methods have different impacts on how Virgo performed?
Yeah, that's actually what I was just getting to. They found that the text-based training, even though it doesn't involve any visuals, was actually more effective than the visual training data.
Hold on, really,
Yeah.
why would text be more helpful than actual images when you're trying to solve visual problems?
Hmm.
That seems kind of counterintuitive.
It is a great question, and to be honest, the researchers are still looking into exactly why that is. One theory is that the language that's used to describe those thought processes, it might tap into like a deeper level of reasoning, almost like we're, hardwired to understand logic through language.
Interesting.
But to really see how this all plays out, I think it'd be helpful to look at some specific examples.
Absolutely. Let's see Virgo in action. Let's get a feel for how it actually tackles these challenges.
Okay, let's do it. All right, so let's actually look at some of those examples from the Virgo paper.
Okay.
I think it'll give you a better idea of how this slow thinking thing actually plays out.
Yeah. Let's see. Virgo's problem-solving skills in action. So which example are we starting with?
Let's start with a success story. A pretty tough math problem that involves semicircles.
Okay.
It really showcases Virgo's careful approach and how it's different from, the original Quintuvio model.
So we're comparing Virgo to its predecessor, seeing how that slow thinking training makes a difference.
Exactly. So remember, Quintuvio, without that special training, it kind of just jumps right into the calculations.
Right.
It doesn't really try to fully grasp the relationships in the image.
It's like trying to solve an equation without knowing what the variables stand for.
Yeah, exactly. You might get a number, but does it really mean anything?
Right, right.
And that's where Virgo shines. It carefully breaks the problem down, describes each semicircle, identifies like the key features,
Right.
and basically builds a solid understanding of the visual context before it even starts crunching any numbers.
Oh, so it's like taking that extra step to really see the big picture.
Exactly. And because of that, Virgo gets the equations right, calculates the area under each curve, adds them all up,
Then gets the right answer.
gets the right answer, yeah. It's like watching a chef carefully prep all their ingredients
Yeah.
before they combine them to make this incredible dish.
Okay, now I'm hungry.
Yeah.
But that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
So you can really see the value of that like deliberate step-by-step approach. But you did mention earlier that there were some instances where Virgo struggled.
Yeah, there was this one case involved interpreting a graph
Okay.
of unemployment data. And this one really highlights the challenges of perception in AI,
Yeah.
how even slow thinking models, they can still sometimes, they can stumble.
Okay, I'm curious about this one. What happened with the unemployment graph?
Well, Virgo initially misread the data in the graph. It missed a really important detail and ended up with like a wrong understanding of the trends.
So it's kind of like those optical illusions that trick our brains into seeing things that aren't really there.
Yeah, exactly. Even with that careful, methodical approach, Virgo's final answer was off because it was based on this faulty initial perception.
So it's like building a house on a shaky foundation.
Yeah. No
But-
matter how carefully you build the rest of it, it's still going to be at risk.
That's a great point. It seems like we humans are pretty good at catching those perception errors. We can double check, consider different perspectives, even just admit when we might be seeing things wrong.
Right. And getting AI to do that same thing, to kind of reflect on perception, as the researchers put it, that's a huge challenge.
Right.
It's not enough to just like break a problem down. AI needs to be able to judge whether its understanding of the problem is even right in the first place.
That makes sense. So it's not just about thinking slowly, but also about thinking critically, questioning what you see.
Exactly. But even with these challenges, the progress we're seeing with Virgo is really amazing. Now, I know we're going to talk about the benchmark results in more detail
Yes.
and, how those different training methods impacted performance.
Yeah. Let's dive into that. I'm especially curious about that whole thing with the text-based training being more effective than the visual training data.
Right.
It's still a bit of a head scratcher for me.
It is fascinating, yeah. To really get it, we need to take a closer look at how Virgo did across all four of those benchmarks.
Okay, sounds good. So which benchmark are we starting with?
Well, Olympiad Bench is a good place to start. Remember, this one's known for its really tough problems.
Yeah.
A lot of them actually come from, like, real-world math and physics competition.
Real brain teaser territory.
Yeah, exactly. So how did Virgo do? Well, it excelled. After that slow-thinking training, it showed a huge improvement on Olympiad Bench, even beating some of the commercial models out there.
Wow, so that methodical approach really paid off when it came to those tough problems. What about the other benchmarks? Did they see similar trends?
Yeah, actually, they found that the more complex the benchmark, the more Virgo benefited from that slow thinking training.
Okay.
So, for example, on Math Vision, which has problems from all sorts of math competitions,
Huh?
Virgo also showed a solid improvement.
Okay, so the pattern is clear, tougher challenge, more valuable that step-by-step reasoning becomes. But let's circle back to that text-based training thing.
hmm
What did they find when they looked into why that was so effective?
Well, they focused on the types of text instructions that were used to train Virgo, specifically the length of the thought process that was shown in each instruction. So the thinking was longer instructions probably means more complex problems.
Makes sense.
Right. So what happened? Well, when they used instructions with thought processes that were, like 2,000 to 4,000 tokens long, these tokens are basically chunks of text that the AI processes.
Okay.
Virgo showed improvement across all the benchmarks.
So up to a certain point, more elaborate reasoning is a good thing.
Exactly. But here's the catch. When they used instructions with even longer thought processes, over 4,000 tokens,
Yeah.
Virgo's performance actually started to go down on most of the benchmarks.
Wait, really? Too much thinking can actually be bad for AI. It's like our brains hitting a wall when we try to juggle too many ideas at once.
Yeah, exactly. And it highlights that tricky balance between being thorough and being efficient, just like in human problem solving.
Yeah.
Now, remember those visual instructions we talked about before?
Yeah.
The ones distilled from QVQ and the ones that Virgo generated itself?
Yeah. You'd think that learning from visual examples would be, like, super helpful for solving visual problems.
Right. But surprisingly, both types of those visual instructions, they didn't really do any better than the text instructions alone when it came to fine-tuning Virgo.
Wow, that's unexpected.
Yeah.
So even with all that visual learning, the text instructions were still just as good, if not better. I wonder why that is.
It's a great question. One possibility is that the visual problems that were used to create those visual instructions, maybe they weren't complex enough to really benefit from that type of training.
So we need, like, next level visual puzzles to really challenge these AIs.
Maybe. It seems like there's still so much to learn about how AI sees and thinks.
Absolutely. It seems like we've covered a lot of ground here, but there's still some interesting details to unpack.
Right.
So should we shift gears and dive into some specific case studies? Those might give us a clearer picture of how this slow thinking approach actually works in practice.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, I'm ready for those case studies. Let's see Virgo in action, like how it handles these real world problems.
All right, yeah, let's revisit that math problem with the semicircles. Remember that one?
Uh-huh. The one where Virgo, like, shows its work.
Exactly. And, we talked about how Quin2VL, the original model, it kind of just jumped right into the calculations.
Yeah, it didn't really understand what was going on in the image.
Right. It's like trying to put together a puzzle without looking at the picture on the box.
Yeah, you might get lucky, but probably not.
Exactly. And that's what makes Virgo's approach so cool. It starts by, describing the image, naming each semicircle,
Yeah.
pointing out the important features.
So it's building that foundation first.
Right, like a good builder.
Okay, I like that.
And because of that, it gets the equations right, figures out the area under each curve, adds it all up.
And boom, correct answer.
Correct answer, yeah.
That's pretty slick. But what about that unemployment graph, the one where Virgo, kind of messed up?
Right. That one's interesting. It shows how even with this slow thinking, those perception errors, they can still trip AI up.
It's like we need to teach AI to be more skeptical, to question what it's seeing.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. We do that all the time as humans, right? We double check things. We think about different perspectives.
Right, right.
We admit when we might be wrong.
Like when we see one of those optical illusions.
Exactly. Getting AI to do that, it's a big challenge.
Yeah, for sure.
But the research with Virgo and these other slow thinking MLLMs, it's a good step in that direction.
It's really amazing to see how AI is evolving,
Mhm.
like tackling these problems in a way that we can actually understand.
It's exciting, yeah. And while we've focused on, the nitty gritty of the Virgo paper today, there's so much more to it.
Oh, definitely.
This research, it could have a huge impact on all sorts of fields.
Yeah, like imagine how this slow thinking approach could change education or science.
Even art and design.
Right. The possibilities are endless. It's kind of mind-blowing.
It really is. But for now, I think that wraps up our deep dive into Virgo and these slow thinking MLLMs.
I learned a ton today. Thanks for breaking it all down for me.
No problem. It was fun. And to everyone listening, keep exploring, keep asking those tough
Yeah,
questions.
keep pushing the boundaries.
The future of AI is bright, and it's up to all of us to make sure it's a good one.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.